Call the Tuesday, October 2nd meeting of the Bucksport Planning Board to order. Roll call.
Stephen Bishop.
Present.
Brian McDonald.
Here.
David Grant is absent. Steve Pike.
Here.
Edward Belcher.
Here.
George Hansen is absent. Jay Duas.
Here.
Review and acceptance of minutes from the September 4th, 2018 meeting.
20th. September 20th meeting.
Oh,
That's correct.
We've
yeah,
already-
okay,
we've already
sorry.
done the four.
I read it right from the sheet.
That's my
Yeah.
error. Sorry about that.
Thank you. September 20th meeting.
I did give you the correct minutes though, didn't I?
I think,
Yes,
yes.
sure.
All right.
And you'll have to change the dates on the minutes that we accepted on the 20th meeting. The meeting of the 20th, we accepted the minutes of the 4th meetings.
That-
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
For some reason,
Other than that, everything's.
I've been getting dates mixed up
Yeah.
lately for some reason. So that should be the 4th on the minutes, not the 20th. And the 20th on the agenda, not the 4th.
Here, motion.
With the date corrected, I would move they be accepted as drafted.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Chair's report, there is none. Code enforcement officers report.
Let's see, on October the 11th, there'll be public hearings held by the town council on a proposed revision to chapter 5 and a new chapter 13 then to the town code that where property maintenance standards will be located. This is a review that's been going on since I think January we started working on this ordinance. For one reason or another it's been delayed. But, so they've held 3 readings, and they also want to hold a public hearing. The most recent change came out of the Regulatory Review Committee, where members of the Senior Resource Committee wanted to have some language added dealing with accessibility, making certain that buildings and properties that are developed are reviewed for compliance with the accessibility standards that are in the state building code. And you'll see in chapter 5, we had originally had a list of exempted or types of structures exempt from building permits, and originally it included stairs, landings, and ramps of any type. And the seniors wanted, instead of making it across the board exemption, to only apply the exemption to residential stairs, ramps, and landings, and require a building permit if it involves a public building. So we made that change, and we also made reference in chapter 5 that there'll be an accessibility standard added to Appendix K, which I'm going to get to in a little bit for your review. So public hearings on chapter 5 and 13 on the 11th. The Board of Appeals is meeting on October 23rd to address requests for a setback variance on Federal Street. That's all I have to report.
Which property on Federal Street?
I can't recall the name. It's property owned by Joyce Greco. She wants to build a small porch on the front of her house, and she can't meet the 10-foot setback, so she's asking for a small reduction, about 1.5 feet.
Boy, they're closer in Federal Street, I think.
Yeah.
They're really close to the thing.
Okay. At this time, I'll open the limited public forum. It's an opportunity for the public to address the board on matters related to land use or planning in the town of Bucksport. Would anybody like to say anything?
It's Blaine Winchester thing that we're talking about.
If you'd like to come up and address the board, that'd be great. If you could just identify yourself, please.
Fred Munster, we're on 39 Willis Road.
Greg?
Fred.
Fred, okay.
And we talked to Jeff the other day about this. Blaine has been cutting wood, supposed to be for firewood, which he's allowed to do that, right? But he's also cutting lumber for people. Trucks coming in now, he said he cut so much, but he's still doing it. And, you know, the noise is getting crazy back there. And plus, he brings in trucks loaded. Now, you're not cutting all of that for firewood, there's no way. And you're bringing in 2 loads of lumber on your log truck, like you used to bring to the mill. And then I asked, remember I asked you about the fire hazard? I went down to see the fire chief, and he was never there. I left my number, he never called me back. The girl said he would call me back. But he's got equipment back there, trucks, front loaders. I think he's got a backhoe back there, I'm not sure. I don't go on the property because he's got cameras around, so he'll call this thing about that. But you got a generator running back there, you got a saw running back there, it could start a fire. And somebody went back there, won't mention their name, went back there and said the place is a disaster. And if the fire ever started, the woods go, you know what the situation it would be. My sister and brother-in-law's house, my house, and if it went across, it would get Beverly's house. And he never called me back on that, so. And I don't think it's right that he's got a regular lumber business going there. The firewood is not just for him, and I don't care if he cuts it for somebody else, if he's stuck to that, but he's not. And I don't think all that equipment should be back there either. I mean, that's up to you guys. I don't know what the rules are for that.
Mr. Chairman, we're going to be taking up, he's going to be agenda down under administrative business. There's an item to deal with sawmill regulations, so we're going to be talking some more about that in a little bit.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Can we ask him a question?
Sure.
You talk about trucks coming and going. How much, what's the volume of traffic through this?
Well, sometimes there'll be a pickup truck goes back there, loads it up with lumber, they leave, or he's got a trailer.
Okay, I mean,
little-
is there like 2 an hour, 3 an hour?
Oh, no,
4 an hour?
no,
Okay.
nothing like that.
Okay.
But they'll load up a pickup,
Okay.
and sometimes there's a trailer on the back of the pickup. I don't know who the pickups are. Or he'll leave with a load on his trailer. He's got a dual-wheel trailer.
Okay,
And, you know,
thanks.
I don't know where he's going with it or anything, so.
Thank you.
At this time, I'll close the limited public forum. Unfinished business, we have none. New business, we have none. Administrative business. 1, continued zoning review for Resource Protection District.
Okay, if you'd like to turn the agenda around to benefit Mr. Munson.
We can do that. You want to talk about sawmill regulations up front? Sure.
Yep,
resource
sounds good.
protection discussion might go on a little while. All right. So, let's see. Well, let me pass this out to you. This actually contains both information on both the resource protection and the sawmill regulations.
Mr. Munster, that property that he's on used to belong to your father, correct?
Yeah,
Yes.
that's all we gave it to him.
He did.
And there, he took advantage of him because he was losing it.
Okay.
The last 2 pages are the ones that deal with sawmills. And I think we have an extra copy of the that one. Pages are numbered, but the one that says at the top 9.5.10 production of land uses continued. That's the one that has the proposed language to address small sawmill facilities. Did you find that, Mr. Mensis?
Yeah.
Okay.
Last page.
All right, so I'm not sure this is going to be the final amendment, but this is a start. So In the table of land uses, you can see about halfway down, I added a type of manufacturing facility called small sawmill facilities. And when you read across that line there, X means it's not allowed in that particular zone. L2 means where it is allowed, it's subject to planning board approval. And the note J8 takes you down below where you see note J8 that says small sawmill facilities may not be operated within blank number of feet of a dwelling other than the dwelling owned or occupied by the sawmill operator. So the zones where I'm suggesting that this land use be allowed include the C2 and C3, which are commercial zones that front on Route 1 and Route 46. ID and IDO, which are the industry development districts down at the former mill site. Route 15, residential commercial, which is a zone that follows Route 15 all the way to Orrington. R1 and R2, which takes in the bulk of the rural parts of the town. Where they're not allowed is in areas where you're likely to see a greater density of residential development, downtown shoreline, C1, and most of the shoreline zones too are excluded from allowing this sort of activity. So what is the activity? That's the definition down at the bottom. A small sawmill facility is a land use that includes the use of a gas-powered portable cutting equipment to process logs into firewood or lumber. A small sawmill facility does not include the use of any other wood processing equipment, except a chipper may be included to process unwanted wood waste. Portable cutting equipment operated under the control of a property owner on their own land to process logs for the property owner's own personal use is not considered a small sawmill facility. So what is not, I mean, if the board is interested in pursuing along these lines that I'm suggesting, what has to be determined is the number of feet set back from a dwelling that you think a small sawmill facility should be located.
And what are other distances that we could compare to for other operations? For example, any sort of other processing facility or any other type of land barrier or any other type of activity that would go on that requires a distance from another property line?
Well, let me take you to,
Is there one for cutting firewood?
Is there one? I don't believe there's one for cutting firewood.
think
is
so.
there? No.
Even for a like I don't mean somebody with just a chainsaw
Right.
cutting wood for themselves.
Right,
It's
process.
like a processor that's selling
He's got
firewood.
his sawmill set up, it's just about to my line and
If-
my sister's.
I don't want to interrupt you and cut you off, but if you could not tell us the distance, so we could try to compare
Oh,
and,
no.
and try to make
I
an
don't-
impartial decision before you give us any information, that would be good.
He measured it last week
Oh, he did.
on Google Earth. I think it was 200 feet or something.
Yeah.
It's pointing right at his house.
Okay.
I'm looking in the addendum 2 to the land use ordinance that deals with mineral extractions, and I'm just looking now at the noise standard, deals with decibel levels, not distances. It's
Right.
Decibel measured at the property line. But there is.
And I see there's a time, you've got a time
Yeah,
zones in
limitation.
there too.
If you did want to use a dB limit, then that's something that nobody in the town is skilled to make that measurement. We have to hire somebody. If there was a complaint about noise, we have to hire somebody to do the measuring.
I do
I
like
have the equipment actually.
I do like the idea of the time frame though.
Yeah. Who wants it in the middle of the night?
The 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. I do like that idea.
And I can remember a gun club I used to belong to. It was 7 a.m., 7 p.m. Usually 7 a.m. to dusk. But then on Sunday it was nothing before 1 in the afternoon.
All right, so section 5.4 is setbacks for different types of mineral extraction operations. So let's look at this one here, processing or storage area.
250 feet.
250
Great
feet.
pond,
This is for great, so we're looking,
Excavations 250,
public road.
sand excavations 250.
so the protected location is a place like a dwelling. That
Yep.
would be near a gravel pit, for example, or a quarry. And the TBD stands for to be determined. So that's it's a judgment call the board makes. You have an application before you.
So, if you could just scroll back up a little bit, Jeff. A public road, 100 feet, 100 feet. Any other lot is 100 feet, and 100 feet for excavation and sand excavation. You guess you could compare tree well, he's not harvesting, he's processing. A private way without a road is only 50 feet. Everything on that chart
Varies from 25 feet to 250 feet.
Those 4, 5, and 6.
Five says 500 feet.
Excavation of product processing storage area may not be located less than 500 feet from the nearest principal structure or planned principal structure. Information. Excavation of a product processing or storage area may not be located less than 5 feet. Well, that would, for excavation, product processing or storage area. So if he has a processing and storage area, that would be comparable.
And then there's another 100 feet from the property line.
Mineral extraction.
We don't know though what kind of decibel levels are reached by this type of equipment, the portable sawmills. You know, how loud are they?
That's another thing to take into consideration too, because if the noise is the issue, it could be 25 feet away from the property line, and then you could move it back up on a potential hill if one were to exist 500 feet, and the noise could even be greater due to the type of equipment that it would be if it was
we are to
elevated.
consider something like this, if we are to consider it, would we be able to have someone get a decibel reading before we pass judgment?
Sure.
I mean, can that be done?
I think, if I remember correctly, when the board reviewed an application for a 20-acre quarry on Route 46, the question about whether DEP's decibel limits would be met at the property line were answered by product information.
Yeah.
And information that I think can be determined about blasting, how much noise that makes typically at the property line. So
That's a good point, Jay.
Just, in this case, this gentleman says, when it runs, it's loud, okay?
It's an industry.
What I would like to know,
Industry.
how loud is it? What is the decibel reading?
So, I mean, you can go to the manufacturing specifications, and that should have information about noise levels. Or, I mean, the internet, I'm sure, will be a good resource to find out.
I'm looking right now.
And then the model number and how new it is.
Those of you that have sat on this board for some time, have you ever run into anything like this? Have you,
Typically, well, in most quarry situations.
but wood, what I'm talking about,
Yeah, well,
in wood operations, have you ever run into this specifically, a sawmill?
So a chainsaw is 102.
I grew up nice.
And this is did you say a 30 horse, or 20,
I don't-
23 horse?
I don't remember.
But it's a bandsaw. I think bandsaws are usually not nearly as loud as a chainsaw.
Well, some of them are bandsaws, some of them are circular saws.
This is a bandsaw, yeah.
The newer ones are bandsaws.
And since it's a residential area, is it just the level of volume or just noise? Because people, and I think
Rural district, so,
my feeling for the comprehensive plan was that preserving that resource of the outdoors and not noise of any volume.
Correct. So with that, we need more information on that than to make a decision tonight. We'd need to know some more specifics on the sawmill.
Until I had a decibel reading, I mean,
You're right.
it's your house, so you're right at your house, and you're hearing this noise,
Well,
and,
it's louder at my sister and brother-in-law's house.
okay.
They're closer to his road where he set up that sawmill. I'm a little bit away, but I can still hear it. But it,
Okay. And you are how far away? Have you measured, you did that, Jeff, last meeting? How far his building is away from the site?
Yeah.
We went to Google Earth.
Yeah.
That way,
It was 200 and,
It was around 200, wasn't it?
something like that.
does that sound about right?
But I know from having my neighbor across the street spend a whole summer logging his lot legally, it ruined that summer. You couldn't be on the deck. Company who came, you had to be inside. It was just annoying. It wasn't particularly loud.
How far away were you from that?
I'm 350 feet from the road, and he was probably 150 to 500 feet in the lot. And
So you're talking way more than what his
yeah,
measurement would be.
over a quarter of a mile, I would
you
say.
know, like somebody just said before, the chainsaw does make a lot of noise. Then it's
Bandsaw.
he's
yeah.
got a bandsaw. Is that what it is?
That's what he told us.
Yeah,
In this
well,
instance,
what
I just approached the owner, and he hurried up on that side, and it was taken care of, you know.
Yeah, because what he says and
Amicably.
what he's got is two different things. Like the camp that he built there, that he said was a shed, until the tax assessor went back there and said, "You got to be kidding me!" I mean, and then it was for the Boy Scouts. Well, never saw a troop up there, you know. And he's got an outhouse and everything. I mean, it's just he made the place a junkyard. Is what he made. It's disgusting. Like I said, I asked the fire marshal to look into it. He was supposed to call me back. He never calls me.
The fire marshal, or the fire chief?
Chief,
Fire chief.
you know, somebody went back there and said the place is like a fire hazard. There's wood chips piled up all over. There's lumber piled up all over. You know, he's just got a mess back there. Basically, is what he's got.
So here's, for example, this is another table that has other things too. A power generator has a setback, and again, protected location lot, which is a lot with a dwelling on it. The setback is TBD, to be determined based on these footnotes here. Setback can be reduced with written permission. It can't be reduced by variance, but it's determined by the planning board based on whatever information you need to determine that the setback is sufficient to ensure that there's no detrimental effect from the noise, or vibration, or smoke, or dust, or odors, or pollutants. So again, you take in what information you think you need to make that determination, but it's entirely up to you to decide X number of feet, minimum required. We could do something similar with this land use, where you could have a set number and refer to DEP noise standards that
Well,
measured at the property line.
That's exactly what I was thinking. I was thinking about getting some sort of another to be determined based on being within the reasonable decibel range for a noise standard.
So the DEP has established standards as like 75 dBA as measured at the property line.
Yep.
I think is one standard. Something like that, you can put in this ordinance here, and then when we get a complaint about excessive noise, then you have to make that measurement.
Correct.
And that's when you have to get a qualified professional to be involved in that.
And how much would that cost the town, or is there a way to write that into the ordinance that it would be at the cost of the complainant, or what's a reasonable thought process?
You wouldn't get complaints if they have to pay.
Right.
Well,
If it was loud enough, you would.
well, we don't want to. Yeah, if it was loud enough.
And you don't, and you don't want the town to have to foot the bill every time somebody
Someone
has
makes a
a
complaint.
disagreement, yeah.
Yeah, I don't want the town having to foot any more bills than we do already. That's something
How
to
would it
think
be if whoever it is that owns the enterprise that's doing this, creating this noise,
Has to prove that
would
it's
say,
lower than
geez,
the threshold.
I'd really like to keep going with this operation. I think I fall within your decibel levels, okay? You have it tested and you show it, and they're the ones that pay for it.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I mean, like I said, I have the equipment at school, and we have a portable sawmill, so I can run it
Yeah.
and take some readings at the sawmill, and then I'll back up 30 feet, 50 feet. And it's not, you know, I can't certify it, but,
Yeah.
I mean, I have calibration equipment and everything, but at least we'll have an idea of what the.
You're
what the numbers
comfortable
are.
that it's certainly in the ballpark.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I do that for the training that the people, for the hearing protection plan that I have, so.
Yeah.
We have apps. I have an app on my phone, matter of fact.
Yeah,
for DVs.
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting, yeah.
They're close, but they're not perfect. But
Is it a slippery slope, though, if we're allowing industrial uses in a residential zone, then do we have to allow other industrial uses in the country?
So why don't we request a site visit based on this, based on for the decimal reading and for the situation as a whole?
See, I wouldn't have an issue, I mean, if
This-
this gentleman wants to continue with this operation,
Right,
I would think he would want to cooperate with us.
I agree with that.
And I myself don't want to touch any of this until I know what the decibel reading is.
And there's, well,
You know,
I
and
agree.
but, you know, is it comfortable, is the noise that he's generating comfortable at 100 feet, or is it comfortable not until 800 feet, 1,000 feet? I mean, that's something I would like to know before we even,
and what sort of foundation are we laying for future issues?
that too. I mean, we can sit here and say, oh, case by case basis. And really, I guess it doesn't have to be, but once you stick a number there,
Yeah,
you lose a lot of your wiggle room on
Yeah.
how we're going to approach anything down
right.
the road.
And we don't really have enough facts to stick a number there right now.
I just
like
don't have the
those-
information myself.
I do like the way Jeff laid it out, though.
those notes that have the different ranges.
Yeah.
I think that would be best, and this, to respond to what you said, Steve, I think we're not looking at allowing, all industry. It's, where this started, if you think back, is where, to me, I think a chainsaw is louder than, or even one of those processors is louder than one of these bandsaws.
Anyone that's ever run a chainsaw for any amount of time
Yeah.
knows how loud that is.
Oh, yeah.
So that's
Well,
okay.
I well know.
So I don't, and no offense to you, I don't have a problem with a sawmill out in the rural part. It's just, and honestly, I'm quite surprised we don't have a standard for one of those processes as well. Because a firewood processor.
It was valuable looking at it on Google Earth because you could see how oddly it was placed. It actually just points right at your home.
Well,
It was
again,
like a-
it was the storage building that he got the permit for.
Yeah, probably that's a story building.
Yeah,
not a
and-
sawmill.
And then
Oh,
he
that
put
doesn't
that
have
in
the
there.
saw in it?
It does.
It does.
does, yeah.
And that's one of the other faults.
Yeah.
That's where it cuts it all, and that one that faces my land, you know.
So where it's in the building, it probably wouldn't be as loud, it wouldn't be as concentrated if it was open. If it was just out in the air.
Is it a gas powered motor?
I think so.
Yeah, I think he
You know,
said it was like
your
a
heat-
23 horse
Yeah.
Kohler.
Gas
He
powered.
wanted
Yeah.
electric back there one time, and then somebody send Central Maine Power, send some guy out, he was looking up and down the road there, and Phil, my brother-in-law, came out and says, "Can I help you?" He says, "Oh, yeah, the guy who's got this sawmill back here wants power back here." He says, "Well, what'd you have to do?" He says, "Well, we have to put a pole on your land." And my brother-in-law says, "Forget it." He goes, "How about the guy next door?" I wasn't up there at the time. He says, "That's my father-in-law, and he don't want it either, so no dice." He says, "Okay, don't shoot the messenger. I'm just here to look at it, you know."
Yeah.
So that plan was axed.
Huh.
And he couldn't go underground. I brought a cable because it's all ledge there. You'd have to blast.
So I guess from here, do we want to pursue a site visit or do we want to pursue a decibel reading, or both?
But keep in mind, you're not doing this for that one property. This is for
Right.
the entire town.
Right, and
This
that's,
is to help us write basically this.
Yeah,
All the more reason why I say I certainly don't want to rush into this.
and I think, just like you asked him not to give any data, any information,
we need more.
I think looking at Blaine Winchester's location would unduly or influence. I think we ought to just, don't even think of this one case, although I know you want us to, but.
I mean, it's do it for everything.
Right, just on its own.
Sawmill operation, quote unquote, should be the focus that we have.
Correct, not Blaine Winchester.
Not Blaine Winchester's sawmill operation.
And you would have to do
A
it when
sawmill.
he's sawing.
Small.
So you'd have to call him and say, "When are you
mean,
gonna saw? We wanna come out."
And if,
Right.
you know, what you're reporting, I mean, that sounds like there's some other issues.
There's some 2x4s.
I mean,
Well,
I believe he can have things out there,
I've
like
been
a backhoe and
built
things like
for
that, but, I mean, Blaine may end up with other issues, not involved in this piece here, but that's not our position. We don't have any part of that right now.
Do other towns have decibel readings in their ordinances based on equipment in similar situations like this or not?
I'm sure they do. I mean, we have a noise standard in our land use ordinance.
Correct.
Not just this addendum we're looking at now, but
Right, but as far as the industrial end of things go, I mean, I guess there's three different ways to look at this, with the industrial potential and the rural area and so on and so forth.
I think most towns consider it an industrial use.
I wouldn't use the word industrial. The way we use the word in our land use ordinance implies it's a huge operation. You know, it's
Right.
A mill-size operation. Commercial is the more appropriate term, I think, to describe anything that's smaller than an industry-level operation. So I would describe this small sawmill facility as commercial land use. So what additional information is the board asking for to be able to move on with this?
I see a table online, the bandsaw wood mill, sawmill, anywhere from 90 to 94 decibels. Running.
At what distance?
Nearby.
Right up.
Yeah,
Right up
nearby.
next to it, I think it means.
Probably right at the machine, 'cause that's pretty loud.
Yeah, it's damn loud, yeah.
You might be better off, instead of trying to figure out how big a piece of equipment is okay, is just follow the DEP standards.
I agree with that. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, the to be determined and.
No, it's a number set at the property line, like 75 dBA.
Oh, okay, yeah, all right, yeah.
And is that something you could research for us, like we ask you to do everything else? Find out what the DEP.
And so if it happens to be, you're too close to the property line, if you're able, you move it back.
Right, and if you
you're
don't,
not,
if
then
you
you can't do it.
if you don't have
And
enough
I guess
room,
if you have a
can't do
thick
it.
stand of trees, and you have a sound buffer, why, good for you, you lucked out, right?
Right. Yeah, if the
If it's wide open space,
Right.
right,
noise is gonna carry.
if the property facilitates it and you can make it work, then good for you. If it doesn't, then
The
it doesn't.
property owner would have the opportunity to put up a buffer too.
So
Which
this-
property owner, the one running the mill,
Good.
or the one
Yeah.
that's complaining about the noise?
Yeah, the one run of the mill.
This is the noise standard we have now in Appendix K. So any application that comes to you, this is one of the standards you review for compliance, and it references the main DEP regulations 375.10. That's the noise standard that they have. And you can ask for additional information if you think you need it. You can limit hours of operation. And you can have a noise mitigation plan prepared by a qualified professional. So this is all things you can do now with any land use that comes to you for review.
Yeah. I like the hours of operation, like you'd mentioned before.
Yeah,
Yeah, the 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And,
in a certain limit at the property line,
correct. Yep.
relatively comfortable limit.
So we could go with the to be determined by DEP guidelines.
This is the standard you
No,
apply.
it's a DEP standard.
Correct.
That it's set.
Yeah.
It's in the
Yep.
Yep.
stated. So
That's fine, that works for me.
Yeah.
That right there.
So this indirectly will establish the distance that
Mhm.
the operator may need to put their equipment in order to meet the noise standard.
Correct. Yep. Yep, I think it's...
And so the formula's already there. We're not putting a number down, you know, if someone's 223 feet away, we're not saying, no, it has to be 225 feet away. It has to be far enough away, no matter what it is. If it's a small one, it can
To
be...
meet that decibel level.
Right, you have
Right.
to
be lower than that.
You have to be lower than the threshold at the
Yeah.
property,
Correct.
your neighbor's property line.
Sir, other than the sawmill vanishing and going away, what would make you happy?
If you just, stuck to cutting firewood instead of, cutting planking or whatever you call it.
That was just a question I wanted to ask.
I mean, he's gonna be there, I guess, regardless, unless you do put him out. I mean, I wouldn't care about that either, because I can't stand him anyway, so. But it's not
Sure.
just, but the thing that got us is when he started cutting, planks and stuff for other people. I mean, where did this come in? That was supposed to be firewood, and he's not only cutting firewood. And then he says, in the article that was in the paper, his son is doing most of it. His son is just in high school. And sometimes, I've seen this more than once, Blaine go back there, start up everything, and then he leaves, and everything's still running back there. There's nobody there.
Has he ever started up this noise before 7 a.m. or after 7 p.m.?
I don't think before 7 a.m. And a couple of times he was there. He used to have lights strung in there. I guess he ran over the generator when he was cutting wood up or something.
Thank you.
So, thank you.
There is a noise bulletin that's been put out by the state called Technical Assistance Bulletin on noise and planning and comprehensive plans. So, looks helpful.
And what is it that they stipulate for a time frame?
Time frame? I haven't read it. It's
Okay.
like 12 pages long.
Oh, is it?
7 p.m. to 7 a.m.
Okay.
Restricted. Sample strategy.
Well, I guess without requesting a lot more information to answer all our questions, we can blanket it with DEP guidelines.
Yeah, and no matter what size if it's a 15 horse, it can be a little
The
closer.
amount of noise
If
that
it's
it
a 50
generates
horse,
is what's important.
Yep.
and you could put a giant gas engine on it, and you'd have to be a half a mile from your neighbor's property line. I mean, it is what it is.
What's the board's thoughts on the proposed description of calling it a small sawmill facility?
How could we better define that to define small?
I mean, do you put a restriction on only so many board feet a week or so many board feet a year?
Yeah,
that
how do you
can
measure
use
and
generally?
regulate
What-
that?
Right, how you gonna?
I have no idea.
Well, what I'm suggesting is we refer to the equipment as portable,
It,
which is, they're smaller by nature anyway.
Okay.
And if you have stationary equipment, that's more along the lines of a bigger operation.
Okay.
Portable suggests that you can hook it up to your
A trailer.
trailer
Right.
and
Yeah.
then go down the road and set up someplace else. I don't think anybody does that right now, but it gives the impression that it's not a large-scale operation. It's small by the limitations of the equipment you're using, being portable, not intended for a mass production operation. So that was my thinking.
yeah.
Anything that's other than gas-powered portable equipment would not fall in that category and be reviewed as just a general manufacturing facility.
Well, I could see one actually being small diesel, two-cylinder diesel.
Yeah.
This bulletin's very informative. I think it'd be worth reviewing.
It is.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the main difference between a small sawmill facility and one that's classified as a manufacturing facility is you can't do manufacturing facilities in the rural districts, where you can, if it's a small sawmill, you can.
Does that bulletin touch on that? Do you want to table this and we can all, you want to email that out to everybody and we can all read it?
Yeah, it would be really helpful.
Okay.
It's really detailed about creating zoning ordinances and what have you to parallel DEP's existing site location of development rules.
Okay. I'll make a motion, we table this pending review of this bulletin that we found.
I second that, because I need information.
Yeah.
I'm going to send this to Jeff so he can print it out.
Okay.
Maybe we can take it with us. Is that possible, Jeff?
Yeah, I believe so.
Any further discussion on that motion? All in favor?
All right. Move on to Resource Protection District now.
Sure.
So what I'm passing around right now is a copy of the town zoning map where I've highlighted areas that were changed to resource protection in 2009. Those are the blue areas. And the purple areas are existing resource protection areas that were already in that zone before 2009. What I would like you to consider doing is looking at each individual blue area and decide if you'd like to ask the town council to change it back to limited residential, which it was before. So we'll start with at the very top. If you look at the screen here, this is a blow up of that area. The area in purple here is what we had to change. But this area down here is already in resource protection. So if you want this to go back to limited residential, my suggestion is look at this as well, and maybe taking the whole wetland out of resource protection.
Is this, I just want clarification, last time we had talked that DEP had, in a form, released some of these areas from needing to be resource protection, correct?
That's correct. In 2012, they decided that these areas didn't need to be in that zone simply because they were a moderate to high value waterfowl habitat.
Okay.
In 2009, that was the whole reason for putting it in RP, because of the habitat value.
Right. And then 2012, they changed their mind and
Changed,
said that doesn't need to be
You
the
didn't need
case.
to do it after all. Or you're free to take it out of RP if you want to.
Oh, okay,
You don't have to, but you can.
okay.
My suggestion is that we do that, take it out of RP, because RP is the most restrictive type of shoreline zone. It's very restrictive as what you can do in these areas, so.
Correct.
The areas that are remote, like this one here, probably wouldn't matter that much to
Yeah.
leave it in RP, but as part of this process, any area you want to rezone, the property owner can be notified of that and have a chance to comment on it.
Okay.
There could be some cases where an owner wants to keep it in RP to protect it, so you just never know.
Okay.
Mrs. Nason's property, does that fall within any of this?
We'll get to that. So the second one is just to the south of the first one we looked at, which is this piece here. This is a small wetland area that, again, we put in RP. But this proposes to take it out of RP.
Did we ever determine if placing it in RP or leaving it out or what have you would affect its tax status? What it would be for the landowner or for the town?
Well, that's an assessor question, but
Okay.
My taxes never changed.
They never did? Okay.
yeah,
All right.
I can't answer that question.
Notify the assessor.
Okay.
This one, for some reason, it didn't scan correctly, so I gotta change it. Try that again. Counterclockwise, there we go. So this, just to orient you here, this is right here, right here,
I own that one. I used to own it.
right? So that the suggestion is to change that back into limited residential. Next one is a little sliver of a wetland here you see on the blow up. It's located right here. Most of that wetland is in Orland, but there's a little part of it that crosses over the town line. That one, I'm suggesting goes back into limited residential. Next one is at the north end of Williams Pond, which the zoning map is right here. That one I note, DEP still calls that a high value habitat, but I don't think for that reason it still needs to be RP. And I'll explain that in a minute here when I get to the text changes that we need to make. Next one is here, and that's located right this area here. Right? Where am I here? Yep, yes. It's right in here, off Silver Lake Millvale. This area has some houses, I think, that are impacted by that, so that would be good, I think, to take that out of RP. And the next one is, this is off Town Farm Road, which is this one right here. And we have, this one, here's a couple of wetlands, those are located right here. And then this one is located right here. This is the one that will affect Dave Grant's property, that's located right here.
Hey, Mrs. Nason, right?
No,
Yeah.
this, Nathan's up in here.
Oh.
So that's it, that's the last one. Now, we also have areas that are currently in RP, we're gonna go through those now. Again, this is currently in RP, I'm suggesting that we propose to take that out of RP. If we're taking this out, take this out as well. This one here, this is a McCann Bog. I'm not sure if that needs to be RP or not. And there are a couple of areas that, this is one here, I don't think needs to be RP. It's at the north end of Long Pond.
Why do you not think it needs to be RP?
Well, I'm not sure it meets any of the criteria for putting a shoreland property in RP,
Okay.
but I'll explain more about that in just a minute. So Silver Lake is in RP because we have required it to be subject to that level of protection because it's a public water supply.
Yeah.
So I'm not suggesting we change that.
Okay.
Over here is a large wetland that includes the property that the lady came to see us about at the last meeting. I don't know if that can be changed, but the answers to these questions about not knowing can be answered by a qualified professional, like a wetland scientist, somebody the town can hire to take a look at these areas. And I was just looking at the area by the Narragansett, looking at McCann Bog, and looking at the northern end of the Long Pond to see if those areas still need to be in RP. And perhaps this one up here too, just take a look at that, see if that still needs to be in RP. The handout I just gave you includes an amendment to Appendix K that would need to make, to go to the pages, Section 7, Establishment of Districts. In Section 7.1.12.1, this outlines how you determine if a shoreline area needs to be RP. As you can see, I've lined out all 7 conditions, not to eliminate them, but to rearrange them so that they are laid out the same way that they're laid out in DEP's guidelines, and using the exact same language in the DEP guidelines. It doesn't change anything, but there's something I want to point out that maybe you might want to recommend we change or not. But so the first guideline for putting property in RP is floodplains along rivers and artificially formed great ponds along rivers. Those can and I guess should be in RP. And you can see on the map I handed out to you that the Penobscot River, most of it is in RP. And I think it's because of that reason. The second one is areas of 2 or more contiguous acres with sustained slopes of 20% or greater. That may also apply to some parts of the river. There's some pretty steep slopes along the river in places. But I don't know of any other wetland in Bucksport that would fit that criteria.
Place that I used to own.
Do you think so?
Oh yeah, it's like that.
Two or more acres of that?
Oh, yeah. That whole bog on the south side of that whole bog, it's like that.
Okay.
It's probably a 200-foot drop and 100 feet.
Yeah.
You don't want to fall down.
So that may still need to be in RP. The third one is areas of 2 or more contiguous acres supporting wetland vegetation and hydric soils, which are not part of a freshwater or coastal wetland as defined, and which are not superficially connected to a water body during the period of normal high water. I don't know if we have any of those areas or not. Number 4 is land areas along the rivers subject to severe bank erosion, undercutting, or riverbed movement, and lands adjacent to tidal waters which are subject to severe erosion or mass movement such as steep coastal bluffs.
I think 3 area would be that Palm Road area. Depression.
Number 3?
Yeah.
It might be. So the next section, I broke this out. It's not in the ordinance now. It's not listed separately, but these 2 criteria are optional. The town added these in. They're not required by DEP. And they include areas where development would adversely affect water quality, productive habitat, biological ecosystems, or scenic and natural values, excluding areas meeting the criteria of a stream protection, limited commercial development, commercial fisheries, and maritime activities district. Now, that's pretty broad category. And I'm not so sure something to think about. And the second one is land areas surrounding Silver Lake, the town's public water supply. As I said earlier, I think we should keep that, protect the quality of that water.
Yeah, I agree.
But number one is the one I'm just questioning about. If it's more restrictive than we really want to apply. It's pretty vague. You know. Development work that would adversely affect water quality. Well, how do you determine that? You know, it's pretty.
Well, we have our phosphorus standards for any
Yeah.
watershed.
Yeah, that's certainly one thing, right?
Yeah.
Productive habitat. You know, how do you evaluate that?
Scientist,
Yeah.
professional.
Scenic and natural values is another one.
Have to have someone with standing.
Pretty
maybe.
broad scope here. So.
Yeah. What brought this up, Jeff? This whole looking at the big picture of this, making this decision of other people's property, whether it's NRP or not. I know DEP made that determination in 2012 that they don't have to be, but what is the benefit for the town to change these? Would it open it up to more development, or what is the benefit by changing this over?
It could in some cases. You might enable property owners to do more of their property than they can now. But what really started this was a request made to change property that was in RP,
Yep.
take it out of RP, and then put back in RP. And it's property owned by David Grant.
Yeah.
And he's asked me multiple times about going through the process of getting that back out of RP now that DEP says you can.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, okay, if we're going to do that, let's take a look at the other areas too at the same time and make all these changes at the same time rather than piecemeal.
Right.
So that's how this started.
Right.
And then we've had Mrs. Nason coming in and asking the very same question. She'd
Yeah.
like to be able to do things with the property that the zoning makes it difficult for her to do. That one might be a little bit of a struggle because she's clearly got a floodplain.
Yeah.
And I think if we had somebody look at it, the answer would come back saying that it can't be taken out of RP.
Yeah.
But you mentioned that the piece of land that she wants to sell, if we could do something that would make that at least a viable option for her, if I recall. But without, I mean, and then it doesn't really reduce the value of her house. She can still have the house and it could be still marketable. It's just you can't do much other than the house.
Bring up the map here to show you, if I can, how her property is zoned now. I didn't realize this until I took a closer look at the map.
So you said the piece of property that you had owned
But
definitely meets that criteria of needing to be
Right in
in,
that area right there, it's really steep slopes.
so that would need,
With the-
so that would need to be in RP.
probably
See this?
A little piece of it.
I'm showing on the screen right now some blow-ups of zones here. This is the Mason property right here. This is part of her lot. You can see just the right end of it. This area here is LRPO, Limited Resource Protection Overlay District. And it goes into her property, encompasses that part of her property that's developed, including the house and also her lawn. Once you get past into the wooded part of the lawn, it goes into RP. So she'd like to have this whole thing put in LRPO. The difference between RPO and LRPO is in LRPO you're not subject to the same restrictions regarding putting a dwelling on the property that you are in RP. So the question is, can we take at least the balance of her lot, if not more, out of RP and have that approved by DEP?
DEP would be the only one to answer that, I guess.
Yes, I have talked to my contact at DEP, and he's looked at this particular property, and he's not committed about whether they would agree to changing the zone or not. But that's why I think we need to hire a professional that helps us put together the justification for taking it out if we can.
I think it would be wise to do that anyway, should something happen in the future where someone questions, well, why was this done?
Right. Yeah.
Why wasn't mine her, for instance? Why couldn't, at least we'd have some proof, some documentation that said, listen, we're sorry, but your house is in the floodplain, and there's nothing we can do about that.
I agree with hiring a professional to look at that. That's a
I checked with the town manager to see if we had any money to pay, and she indicated that there might be funds available. She wanted to have some idea of the cost, but I happened to speak to an engineer who's working on a project in town here, and she gave me the name of a wetland scientist that she thought would be very helpful, very knowledgeable. So I'm going to
There are
contact her.
some good ones around.
Yeah, I'm going to contact her and see, explain to her what we're looking for, and see if she can give a ballpark figure of what it might cost.
I'm just going to throw this out there. This might sound like a little much, but would it be possible to notify these property owners of this situation and have them request that their land be assessed? Every piece that we're talking about removing in or out, if they were interested in having that even be looked at or not. Because if they wanted it to be, then we could have all these done at the same time.
Well, that's part of the process, Steve.
Yeah.
Once you decide what changes you want to make to the map,
Yeah.
then the property owners that are involved in that do get notification of, there'll be a public hearing to be held, and they'll have a chance to either support or oppose the change, and then you decide where you want to go from there. Yeah, all the owners are involved in this.
Similar
I
to the
can't
meeting that
imagine
happened.
anyone that owns property would not want to change to limited residential. Can you?
Well, you never know. You never know. There might be somebody who's very concerned about protecting the wetland.
Habitat,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
And they have
And it's their property.
family members that
Yes.
want to put up 3 houses that they can't because now it's an RP and they could if it was in LRP.
I spoke with somebody the other day who was talking about putting their land in a tree growth type of program where they want to make sure that their lot stays whole. They don't want it divided up after they pass. So people are particular about those things. So that's up to them. It's their land. I guess what I'm getting at is I just didn't want to have the town spend any more money assessing any individual sites unless the property owner was interested in having it changed over.
Oh, I get you.
That's what I was getting at. Why I don't want to have to see the town spend money unless it's
I think several
necessary.
of them would be interested because most of them were here at the public hearing when it was put into RP. I was one of them, and there were a lot of upset people.
Okay, that was in 2012.
No.
Nine.
Before that.
Yeah, it was 9 when it was put in. Then they changed their mind again. Well, yeah. So is that possible for us to send out another letter? Once we find out whether or not a professional can assess these sites or how much it would cost, to see if we get any feedback from the property owners, if they would be interested in having their site reviewed, and then the town doesn't have to spend any money on. If someone wants to just leave it alone, then we can just cross that off the list and not have to spend the money on it.
Well, so you're suggesting that before we do anything, we notify all the involved property owners of what we're thinking of doing?
Yes, of what we're going to propose, that the sites be assessed by a professional to determine whether or not they need to be in resource protection or not.
The only ones I think should be evaluated by a professional are the ones that, not the ones that are highlighted in blue. Those are the ones I think can easily be taken out because they were in LR.
Right, and the DEP has said they can be released, correct?
So I would suggest this one up here because it's this is going back in LRO, why not do the whole thing?
Yep.
That one should be looked at.
Okay.
And McCann Bog, perhaps, that one actually has, there's a camp that's in that shoreline zone.
Okay.
And then at the north end of Long Pond, I think that one should be looked at. Actually, I've had a request from a property owner to take out of RP
Okay.
several years ago. And then this one down by Duck Cove, and they're missing this one here, I think. So just those areas.
So we have 4.
Leave the river alone, leave Silver Lake alone, and, yeah, so that's.
So if those 4 property owners were interested in having
It's
it,
not just 4, though.
Yeah, some of those lots probably, some of those spots are probably about 5 or 6
It's
different
hard to see on
properties.
this map, but I'm sure there are more than 4.
oh wow, okay,
Especially the one by Duck Cove, that one encompasses several property owners.
okay. Hmm.
Excuse me, gentlemen, but I'm gonna take off.
All right, you
All
take
right,
care.
Thanks for taking issue on that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mister.
How about we start by getting an estimate of what it would cost to do this?
Yes. That's good.
And based on the estimate, if we have the support of the town manager to go ahead and spend that money,
Yep. Yep. That's a good idea.
then we'll decide.
Yeah.
Yep.
I just hate to spend a lot of money for no reason.
That's a good plan.
All right,
Do
and
you need that into a motion, Jeff, or can you just?
No, that's all right. I don't need a motion for that. So the last change in the handout I gave you deals with accessibility. And I'm sorry I didn't number these pages. I should have for easy reference, but I didn't. So section 9 is a table of land uses. And about halfway down, one is decks, porches, stairs, and ramps. See that?
Yep. 1.4.
Yes.
Yep.
There's no changes in that line there, but look at the notes. There's 2 notes, A10 and A12. A10 you'll find to be a note in every non-shoreline zone, and A12 is a note in every shoreline zone. So if you look down at the land use notes below, A10 says that, and again, this is non-shoreline, the installation of stairs and ramps currently says is not subject to review or approval. I added for dwellings to clarify that if it's a stair or ramp for a public building, for example, or not other than a dwelling, it is subject to review. If it's simply for a dwelling, residence, you can replace your stairs, add stairs, ramps without a permit, which is what it is now.
Yep.
A12, the language essentially says that you don't need a review provided you meet certain size requirements, but again, I'm suggesting we apply that to just for dwellings. So again, if you have a public building in a shoreline zone and they want to add stairs or ramps, that will be subject to review. That correlates to the chapter 5, which is going to require a building permit for stairs and ramps for public buildings. So that just makes certain that our land use ordinance agrees with our building ordinance.
Yep.
You're getting into ADA.
No, I'm not. I'll tell you why. Go to the next page. Section 12, General Land Use Standards. This is a proposed new standard that would be under the public safety standards. 12.29, accessibility. And the objective of the standard is to ensure the accessibility of public facilities.
That's ADA.
No, it's not.
No?
Public facilities is ADA.
Let me explain to you that we're not going to become a town that enforces ADA. What we are enforcing now, and have been since the beginning of this year, is the IBC, which is part of the MUBEC, Maine Uniform Building and Energy Code. In the IBC, the state decided to add in a chapter in that code that they had not adopted previously. And that chapter is a chapter that deals with accessibility, Chapter 11. The chapter references a standard that contains accessibility regulations that are very close to ADA standards, but they're not exactly the same. It's called A117.1. It's a standard that's adopted by an outside agency that writes standards. This one deals with accessibility. That's what's enforced in the state building code, not the ADA standards. So we don't talk about ADA, we talk about these standards. And what else is included in Chapter 11 pertaining to accessibility for buildings and other structures as well. So we're not enforcing ADA. That's a whole different ballgame.
Well, if that move,
We're enforcing the accessibility standards in Chapter 11 of the IDC, which is in the Maine Uniform Building Energy Code.
What's IDC?
IBC, International Building Code,
Oh, okay.
2015.
As long as these IBC, whatever you want to call them, as long as they're stricter than ADA, that's fine.
They're not. I don't believe they're stricter. I think
Because
they're about the
ADA
same.
is federal.
Yep.
Yes, and sorry, we either have to be stricter or meet ADA. It's not both.
As I said,
Yeah.
the
School's still at ADA.
117.1 is nearly equivalent to the ADA accessibility standards. There are some minor differences. I can't explain to you what they are, but there's some minor differences but again, we're not, our land use ordinance and MUBEC do not mention ADA, period. It's not mentioned. It's a
And
standard.
that can apply to residential, sure.
The language we're adding here pertains only to public facilities, not to dwellings. The objective is to ensure the accessibility of public facilities. Yes, you have accessibility standards that can apply to private dwellings, but we're not going to go there.
Okay. This makes things parallel, so.
So the A10 is not governed by any particular rule. This A10. Installation of stairs or ramps and buildings not subject to review or approval. It doesn't have to follow ADA, IBU, or whatever. It doesn't. Is that what you're saying? No.
It's not enforced by the town. We have, the town has adopted and enforces NFPA 101, which is a life safety code. That does have requirements for stairs and ramps that are similar to what the ADA requires, similar to what the ANSI standards require. But again, we're not enforcing those standards for dwellings, just for public buildings. If a private property owner wants to build their ramp in compliance with the standards that apply to ramps, they can do that. If they don't want to, then they don't have to. They're not required to by the town.
No, but insurance regulations do.
Yeah, well, that's fine. That's fine. You have
You know,
insurance companies going to regulate it.
So it's not a catch-22. Is or isn't.
So the language that's proposed is that's 12.29.1, new site improvements and changes to existing site improvements, including but not limited to parking spaces, sidewalks, stairways, ramps, and accessible routes to buildings and structures, must comply with applicable accessibility requirements identified in the Maine Uniform Building and Energy Code. That's the Chapter 11 I mentioned earlier. 12.29.2, new public buildings and structures and changes to existing public buildings and structures must comply with the applicable accessibility requirements identified in the Maine Uniform Building and Energy Code. 12.29.3, the reviewing authority may require secondary documentation prepared by a qualified professional to verify compliance with applicable accessibility requirements. So when you get a site plan, say for example, the most recent one you did was the muscle packing facility, or one of those two in the industrial park. They submitted a site plan showing how the site's developed, where the parking's going to go, where the building's going to sit. when you apply this standard, you're gonna look at the parking lot and see if they've identified accessible parking spaces, and see if they've identified an accessible route from the parking lot to the building. But that's essentially as far as you can go. Once you get into the building, then the last section here is, it should be the 1229-2 is what will be looked at, in addition to the language in Chapter 5 of the building ordinance. So, in other words, you take a look at the outside of the building for compliance with accessibility, I take a look at the inside when I do my review of the application for building permits. That's not different than what we do now when a project comes to you, like the Muscle facility, for example. They did have a building they were going to build there. But all you looked at is where it sits on the property. You didn't look at the structure, what's inside. That's out of your purview. That's the building inspector's purview that deals with those things. So that's why that section is in there, just to clarify that. You deal with the site, the building inspector deals with the building for accessibility purposes.
Yeah, there's life safety codes and stuff for accessibility in bathrooms, and everything else.
Do you need a motion to approve this?
I see them on all the plans.
Well, let's see. So let's go back to, we're dealing with three different things here. We're dealing with accessibility, we're dealing with shoreline zoning, and we're dealing with sawmills in this one proposed amendment to Appendix K. So I'm not sure the document as a whole is ready yet for you to take it to the next step, which would be a public hearing, by the way.
No, right.
Public hearing is the next step.
Yeah.
So if I can go back, so what I'm hearing is the only concerns you have are about sawmills, the noise standards. Resource protection, I think you're pretty much okay with the, taking those out of RP, the ones that were put in RP in 2009. And the question is, what about the other ones too? So I'll work on that to try to have something for you to look at the next meeting. Not the meeting on the 18th, but the meeting
November's regular meeting?
And I'm guessing you're okay with the proposed accessibility changes?
You need a motion on that one?
No, I don't, no.
Not ready yet?
I'll just take your direction and hopefully have something more for you to look at the next meeting in November.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you as always for all your research of that.
Any other administrative business? Yeah?
No, I don't. One thing I want to just let you know, I have to admit doing this, I made a date error earlier in the minutes. I don't know why I did that, but you asked me at the last meeting to send out another notice to the abutters for the mobile home park subdivision.
Yes.
And I did that. I sent it out, but I made an error on that notice.
One was the 18th, one was the 20th.
Same date error.
Yeah.
I called it the September, October 20th meeting, when I meant to say October 18th. So I sent a third notice out
People.
to correct it. So I'll let you know that happened, and I apologize.
We went over budget on stamps.
Yeah.
For some reason, I just didn't notice the error until it was too late.
Probably look at the wrong calendar or something.
I did, exactly. I did.
Where I'm in a butter for that property, just to let everyone know, I think right now I do plan on attending those meetings and participating, but I will probably abstain from voting on any particular decision being made with that, where I'm in a butter, just to make you guys aware.
We'll deal with it. Well, if you're going to participate in the review, then
Yeah,
that would
probably
demonstrate you don't
No,
abide.
I'm sorry, I said participate, I should have
Probably recuse
said
yourself.
attend.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll still attend.
10 doesn't a butter, but
Yeah,
not a.
correct. Yeah.
We had that discussion at a recent Board of Appeals meeting. The applicant for the variance request, one of the board members was in a butter.
Yeah.
He actually lived across the street, so it wasn't a direct abutter, but he was within 100 feet of the property, so he got the abutter notice. And he decided that he couldn't participate.
Yeah.
And I suggested, well, just because you're a butter doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be biased. Either you have a conflict of interest or you're biased.
Yeah.
If you describe yourself or you are described as either one of those, then you shouldn't be participating in application review. But being in a butter doesn't necessarily mean that you have a conflict of interest or you have a bias.
Yeah.
But if that's the position you'd like to take, then I guess that's your call.
Yeah, we'll get there, I guess you're right, we'll cross that
certainly
bridge when we
have
get there. I'd just like to,
Have an opinion on the project, so.
Correct.
As an abutter, I would think.
just wanna do what's right for everybody involved, I don't wanna put anyone in a tough spot.
So, I've been asked by a few people in the last few weeks about Whole Oceans. Is there any news from them? I've read that, that they're not even finished applying for some of the permits that they need.
They haven't even purchased it yet.
Yeah,
from
they
Maine.
haven't purchased the land
That's
yet.
supposed to be October, I heard, wasn't it, this month?
I'm not sure what the status is on the purchase of the property. I've not received any applications yet for planning board review.
The wood has been removed from the lot. There's no more wood
It just-
processing going on there.
It just seems like the longer these untalked about delays occur, and it just, hopefully they won't just pack up and disappear.
I was
Oh,
under the
heavens.
impression that they were gonna be breaking ground.
I thought that was
In
already supposed to
October.
happen, yeah.
That was my impression that I got.
It was originally
Well, the
August.
Norwegian one is falling apart in Belfast.
That one in
too.
Belfast is falling apart.
Well, and that's what I'm
Yeah.
kind of, that's kind of a worry. I mean, it's a huge thing for Bucksport, and we certainly don't want them to.
Rich Rotella could probably answer those questions. I guess we
figured
should.
he'd be here.
I
Guess we
asked
should.
him last time, and he wouldn't answer. He said something about the paper says it's still going. That's all he would say. So he probably knows something but won't say.
Well,
When your official answer is the paper says,
yeah, that's bad news.
Yeah,
doesn't
that,
sound
that
I scratch it.
really
I've given those answers quite a bit.
Well, I hope
That's-
it doesn't fall apart.
yeah, that's not good.
This fiberite facility that the town transfer station's waiting for, that's hocus pocus.
Yeah.
This is,
Yeah, but that's already broken ground. They've run into multiple
Delays.
delay after delay.
Money.
Well,
patents.
money, patents, poor engineering, poor planning, poor design. I mean, you could throw a dart at the entire wall and you hit a problem they have. All right, I said I'd ask the question.
Yeah, boy, I'm just so curious about that. I mean, that's a big thing, and no one seems to know it. You don't talk to the
So
development guy.
Yeah, is there any communication with the town with Whole Oceans at all, or we're waiting for that process
I don't
to
know.
play out?
I haven't been involved in any discussions with Whole Ocean, so I can't tell you what's taking place.
their rep was at one of these meetings, was it
All
last
the
month or the
paper.
month before?
Seriously, he knows.
One of their reps was here.
What's going
It
on.
was before the Bay Festival.
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
this summer.
It was July.
And
That's-
he introduced himself, he
Yeah,
talked to us all.
yeah.
I spoke with him again during the Bay Festival.
Yeah.
They
Yeah,
had
I
a
did
booth.
as
They had
well.
a booth set up down there.
Yeah, giving out salmon.
Yep.
They were giving out salmon and I missed it.
Yeah.
It was good, actually. It was very
Love
It was
it.
good.
really good. They
Yeah.
flew
I
in
usually have to
for-
catch my own, but I love salmon.
All right, I gotta go to work.
Yeah. I entertain a motion.
Motion for adjournment?
Very good.
All in favor?